Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
For more on what we can expect on Capitol Hill this week and the Mueller hearing, let's bring in David Corn, Washington bureau chief at Mother Jones, and MSNBC political contributor Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst, and Siraj Hashmi, writer and editor for the Washington Examiner, here with me in New York. I do want to start with you, David Corn, because based on any sort of reporting, everybody's trying to figure out what will Mueller say. Will he go beyond all 438 pages, and what are the key questions to ask? What are you hearing?
I doubt he'll go beyond what's in the report. I keep thinking of the phrase within the lines. He will play within the lines. Now, that said, there's still a lot of room for drama. You can have congressmen say the president says court exonerated him. Is that true? He can quote from the report, he is not exonerated. The president says your report found no collusion. Is that true? He'll say, no, that's not what we looked at. They can say your report says that Trump denied the Russian attack on the U.S. election in 2016, but sought to benefit from it privately. And he'll say, yes, that's what's in the report. The report says that he dealt with Russia while saying he had nothing to do with Russia. Is that true? Yes, that is true. So I think he can bring the report, if not fully alive, but at least emphasize some of these key points in a way to go after the spin from Trump, the Republican Party, Bill Barr, and the conservative movement. And that in and of itself will be valuable. As a reporter, I'd like to see him provide more information and answer questions that we have upon reading the report, but I don't think we're going to get that from Robert Mueller.
And Paul, you're the butler here. You're the lawyer here, rather, I should say. David kind of gave us a preview of what questions he thinks are important. Of course, you have Volume 1 of the Mueller report and Volume 2, which deals specifically with obstruction. Where would you be more focused with your questioning if you were a congresswoman or man?
I would think about the 10 allegations of obstruction that Mueller found. I would ask Mueller, if Trump weren't president of the United States, would you have charged him with crimes? And the answer must be yes. So when you ask people what they know about the Mueller report, what most people say is no collusion. It's incumbent on Mueller to speak the truth, to not let the president and the attorney general get away with their great deception of the American people. The fact is that the Mueller has been played by Trump and Barr, and I think he's got a historical obligation and a patriotic obligation to correct the record.
So, Rod, you're in D.C. on most days, just a few blocks from Capitol Hill. Right. What's the Republican strategy going to be going into this? And we have had some reporting on what the Democrats plan to do, try not to filibuster as much and just get to targeted questions. What's the strategy overall?
Republicans want to point and highlight the abuses within the Department of Justice and the FBI that led to the Mueller investigation. So looking at the FISA court and the information that was brought forward to basically spy on the Trump campaign through Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and they really want to bring forward that the IG report will be the final say on all of this. It won't be the Mueller report.
But we saw that preview.
Well,
we saw that preview of his 88 appearances on Capitol Hill, Paul, Robert Mueller. When he's gone on there, he's not going to have any of it. He will turn off the microphone. He will stare icily at them.
There's obviously political risk for Democrats to bring Robert Mueller up for testimony because he's going to be questioned by Republicans about this, and that's just going to add to more fodder for the news cycle that it wasn't really about the Trump campaign colluding with the Russian government. It was about the abuses within the Department of Justice and the FBI to open up this investigation.
That's really not the case here. You'll see no Republican interested in obstruction and no Republican interested in the Russian attack on the election. The Pfizer, this gets into the weeds, but this whole notion of focusing on a Pfizer application that came out in October 21st, a few weeks before the election, as having anything to do with the origins of the Russian investigation is a canard that is being, put forward by Fox News and friends of the president to distract from the real issue of the Russian attack.
We don't know the impetus of this investigation. We
do know. We do know. What do you mean
was
we
it
don't
Trump
know?
colluding with the Russian government? Because it wasn't exactly that.
Actually, even if you read Devin Nunes' own memo, he says that the investigation started at the end of July because of what happened with George Papadopoulos hearing about Russians having information on Hillary Clinton. We do know. There's no question to this. I mean, it's a false. It's a false.
The Democrats and the Republicans. It's possible that the Democrats and Republicans at the hearing are going to get in this same kind of back and forth, and that will do a disservice to the American people. Look, Mueller's an old pro at this. He was the FBI director for over a decade, and as you've noted, he's testified 88 times before Congress. So he knows how this works. If he doesn't want to say anything, then he won't. He doesn't have to. But again, what he found was an elaborate conspiracy by the President of the United States to obstruct justice. Most of the American people don't understand that what he found was evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors.
It is Tuesday, the 23rd of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A little smidgen, just a small dash of hot, smoked Hungarian paprika makes all the difference in the world, indeed. Well, Mueller will be testifying, such as it will be tomorrow, and I believe he begins the first round about halfway through the show. I'm pretty sure that Hartman will be carrying most of the testimony, so we may just go ahead and have a full show unless I'm able to figure out how to link up the broadcaster, and maybe we'll be able to stream it. We'll see. No guarantees on that, but I'm pretty darn sure Hartman will have most, if not, he wouldn't have all of it, but for most of his show, I'm certain that he will be attending to the Mueller testimony. The Justice Department sure is acting like a sovereign citizen. Yeah. Here is this little card that says, an OLC memo drafted because of Watergate shows that you can never charge a sitting president with a crime. So apparently, no one is above the law except the President of the United States. I don't really think that's the way it's supposed to be. And who is the DOJ? Speaking of which, we have a horrendous story about ICE, which is part of the DOJ, by the way. And what they're doing to American citizens, let alone, the people coming here saying, save me. Yeah, we'll save you. Plus, Maddow had on her show the clip of detainee kids being interviewed, like an oral history of sorts, I would say, about their time and the conditions inside these icebox baby gulags. We are torturing children. We're torturing babies. And all I get here in Rogue River from the loudmouth Trump bros is, well, they deserve it, don't they? They came here illegally, and it doesn't matter if you tell them they came here illegally. This is the process. They just don't like brown people, but do not dare call them a racist, because if you do, that means you're a racist. Where have I heard that before? They'll rant and they'll rave about how much you're a racist for bringing up racism, and you just use racism because this is what libturds do. They use racism to shut down the conversation. Yeah, well, actually, there's projection there once again. It's the Trump bro repugs who use race to shut down the conversation. You're using race, you're using race. And they'll scream and yell at you in the process, just to make sure their point is made. Well, we are not just in a constitutional crisis here in the United States. I would posit that we are in a grave moral crisis. Are we good Germans? Even those of us who are actively raising our voices, sounding the alarm, are we doing enough? And by not doing enough, does that make us good Germans too? We are in a grave moral crisis. And it looks like it's just getting worse for the world. Boris Johnson as Prime Minister? Jeez. Well, maybe it's a Monty Python sketch. I can only hope. Well, so back to the Mueller testimony. I have said repeatedly over the years that we have been under the aegis of Mueller and his investigation to not make Mueller into the great savior. He is not going to save us. I need to remind folks, Bob Mueller wasn't very well liked when he was U.S. Attorney in the Bay Area. And what was it about? Yes, immigration. Going after brown people. Essentially bending the law to fit the needs of an ideology that was in power at the time. Yeah, GW. So everybody says he's by the book. Now, Catal last night or yesterday mentioned, yeah, he's so by the book. The DOJ just rewrote the book, and now he's going to go by that book. The DOJ, I joke, is acting like a sovereign citizen. Granted, Mueller wrote a letter to the DOJ asking for guidance on what he can and cannot speak about. So the DOJ comes back and says, you can't talk about anything. Don't say a word. Okay. He cannot talk about any crimes that he discovered along the way. Have you ever heard of a criminal investigation that when they were investigating the murder of a young girl and they came across other bodies, that they could not charge a crime for all those other bodies that they knew this monster had killed, buried in the guy's backyard? Oh no, we discovered all these bodies in the backyard in the course of an investigation for a crime that happened off the yard. So, yeah, you can't talk about those crimes. Really now. That's not how it works, except if you have Bill Barr as Attorney General who says the law is what I say it is. I mean, if the OLC can put out a memo saying the president cannot be charged with a crime because of Nixon and Watergate, they came that close. So they made sure they got a memo. Somehow the DOJ supersedes the Supreme Court, Congress, the people of the United States. Seems like they always protect their own, don't they? Even if it means turning over the United States and democracy to Vlad. And don't doubt for a moment. Do not doubt for a moment. You just know that Boris got some help from Natasha. Or is it Natasha? And now he's Prime Minister. What's on the rest of the menu here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, by the way. I should let everyone know there is roasted corn in the chowder because that's how it becomes a chowder here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, at the top, David Corn from Mother Jones took apart that lying hack from the Washington Examiner, Siraj Hashmi, for repeating the right-wing lie about the origins of the Russia investigation. Gaslight me once, shame on you. Gaslight me, 500 or more times? And we're going to call you a mofo Russian dupe, if not an actual asset. On the rest of the menu, the Department of Agriculture wants to kick over 3 million working-class people off of food stamps to make a conservative Minnesota millionaire happy. Well, look, you got to know where your bread is buttered, don't you? A new Trump administration rule lets ICE rapidly deport undocumented immigrants without due process, even if you're a documented United States citizen, by the way. And no one can really dispute Republican Dan Crenshaw's wholly misleading attack on the minimum wage because he lost an eye in the war. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Huawei Technologies secretly helped North Korea build and maintain its wireless network. No wonder Trump got so many love letters from Kim. And the resignation of Congo's health minister unblocks the introduction of a second and more effective Ebola vaccine. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right-ish of the page, right there where the social media scroll is, you will find the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly, for doing so. Please take a look to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and there is the Patreon link. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We've been broadcasting 24/7, 365 as Resistance Radio because there's plenty to resist, and our resistance protects the very fabric of our democratic society, which we call the United States of America, and lovingly, endearingly also as the Great Experiment. Okay. We're all test tube babies, aren't we? Mm-hmm. That's why we would like to have the culture grow, prosper, flourish, and everybody get equal protection and due process under law. And that recurring contribution, it could be simply the cost of a latte or any kind of espresso type drink if you could afford to send those funds once a month our way. Takes out a big chunk of what we need to do to pay our bills, and in the process, of course, equipment, machinery always needs to be replaced and added to. So thank you for your generosity over all these many years, and if you're a new listener, do consider contributing here to Resistance Radio. Thank you so much. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter and see it on that social media scroll right over there by the chat room link, you can do so simply by going to @Netroots Radio. And Tom takes care of that, and we are forever thankful he does so as well. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary, a very integral part to this multimedia operation. Yeah. I'm overhead projector old. And the show notes and links diary is almost like the overhead projector. So for all of those nerds who were in the AV department, you know how important the overhead projector really is, even more so than the film strip. So the show notes and links diary posts about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Codes, and I get the link to that out on social media and what's known in the industry as that scramble period. All right. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and look, wherever podcasts are found. They're all out there. Billions, probably. Billions. All right, we better get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I really wanted to talk about the FSB getting hacked. I really want to do the Internet Research Agency, the ones that pretty much, according to Jackie Spear, she's very opaque. She's because she sits on these committees and she can only say so much. There's something more to what she's saying. And what she's saying is that there's evidence that the Russians actually hacked into actual voting machines. So what is she not saying? She's precluded from. So I really wanted to get into that. But probably we'll attend to some of those stories later in the week, especially with Mueller coming up. But this first offering here is by Alan Pike out of Think Progress. And Trump wants to kick 3 million more people off food stamps for what Alan Pike calls the stupidest of reasons. Well, I would probably take issue with stupidest. There's no bottom to stupid with the Trump administration. All right. I think he means the stupidest to date. Well, I don't know. Once again, there's a lot of other stupid things going on. Is this vying for stupidest? Yeah. Well, the Department of Ag is aware this proposal will shrink grocery budgets for a massive share of people, over 3 million. It just cares more about making a conservative millionaire in Minnesota happy. That was a message on a brief press call last night, Monday evening. As USDA Acting Deputy Undersecretary. They got a lot of acting. Brandon Lips. Yeah, that's a nice name for a guy giving you a message. Described the agency's proposed elimination of a policy called broad-based categorical eligibility, affectionately known by Austerians as the BBCE. The new rules will force state program administrators to revert to old systems that pile up additional paperwork, staff hours, and costs. It was unclear if the agency factored those costs into the $2.5 billion in annual savings Lips projected from the maneuver, a vanishingly small drop in the multi-trillion-dollar federal spending ocean. But hey, a drop is a drop and it's got to get balanced out. The rule will also knock more than 250,000 children out of free school meal programs. Yeah, good. Education. The more stupid the people are, the more willing they are to give up, the very fabric of our democratic government. Though the agency expects, maybe I should back up and say, in this reporter's opinion, of course. You know when I'm joking or adding on. Though the agency expects almost every one of them would be able to win access, at least to the reduced meal options in their schools, Lips did not say what the agency might do to alert parents that they would need to fill out new applications for the program. Because if people fill out the applications, they might get accepted now, wouldn't they? So, okay. Well, essentially what this boils down to is this fellow Lips saying, don't worry about it. they can go to the emergency room equivalent of their school meal options. Always that. Well, of course, these rules may never get implemented. An initial public comment period of 60 days begins tomorrow during the Mueller hearing, by the way. The rule will likely attract huge numbers of formulaic objections as advocacy groups provide their members suggested language to submit. The substantive notes challenging the USDA on facts, data, and academic research they fail to acknowledge in their proposal are more likely to force further review. And luckily for opponents, the facts are not friendly to the administration here, and they never are. That's why they like to cook the books. Cooking the books. So who is Trump's chef? Rebecca Intralgo of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Trump administration is making good on its promise to rapidly detain and deport undocumented immigrants who live and work in the U.S. According to a new notice by DHS published in the Federal Register yesterday, Monday, undocumented persons would be subject to rapid deportation without due process, a scheme known as expedited removal, if they have been continuously present in the U.S. for 2 years or less. Prove it. Of course, they're holding a 17-year-old U.S. citizen born in the U.S., but he just happens to be brown. Stopped at an at a constitutional free zone, border stop, they call it, but within 100 miles, there's this buffer now. How many people know about that? Going to, they were in high school, by the way, and going to a soccer scouting event so they can try out to be soccer players at a university, or maybe the pros. Get stopped by ICE, Border Patrol. Show me your papers. They showed them their school ID. Don't have a passport? Come with us. Been there for almost 6 months. Now, Jonathan Swift, I know very many people don't remember Jonathan Swift. Who reads? I'm sure he's on an audiobook somewhere. But he gave what was known as a modest proposal, essentially, saying the way to help Ireland is to eat their kids. It would help, the British economy because there's a lot of Irish kids to eat. It would help Ireland because then they have a product in which they can give the world, especially the empire. So I always think of Jonathan Swift when we need a modest proposal. If we have these 100-mile buffer zones in which we can demand to see papers, what would stop us from kidnapping the kids of white GOP voters because they looked Russian? And then threw those kids in icebox baby gulags so their parents would self-deport back to Vlad. Then, what if we adopted out those kids to Somali refugees in Minnesota? These show me your papers laws would stop right here and right now. ranting a little bit on this Tuesday, the day before Mueller hearings. Well, I suppose I could tell people, well, it's wholly expected indeed. Josh Israel, also of Think Progress, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, Dan Crenshaw, we all know him as a repug, and I'm using that affectionately, please, okay? If we're lib turds, there's the equivalent of a repug, okay? It's called an offset. Maybe that's something they'll understand. But he's a repug from Texas. And you know the crazy is always bigger in Texas. Really, look at their swimming pools. Well, he claimed yesterday that a proposed raise in the federal minimum wage was emotionally driven and bad for economics. Yeah, I suppose, when you're scrambling to pay the bills and making a choice between insulin for a family member or food for the baby, you might get a little emotional. And he also says that the businesses already have a budget for how much they will spend on workers' wages and would not possibly increase it, which just goes to show this guy has never run a business. The first-term Texas Republican, we like to call him repugs here at Netroots Radio, was on Fox News explaining why he voted against the Raise the Wage Act last week. The bill, which passed 231 to 199, would gradually raise the hourly federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 for most workers. If it becomes law, it is estimated that would raise pay for tens of millions of Americans. And the thing that Crenshaw doesn't realize, and I'm not going to make a joke because about him being myopic. I'm just not going to make that joke, okay? And don't expect me to make that joke that he's myopic because he only sees one side of something. I won't make that joke. But Crenshaw doesn't realize that when tens of millions of Americans have money to spend, guess what? They spend it. They're not rich. The rich hoard their money because they have so much they need to hoard it. Pile it on top of itself. That's what hoarders do. Americans who get some more money go out and spend it. And what does that do to the economy of the United States? Well, yeah, but because Dan Crenshaw cannot be argued with, because I got to tell you, every time he's going to bring up the fact that he lost an eye in the war. So you can't dispute his arguments. He will never let you. Well, of course, there's many, many facts that dispute Crenshaw's understanding of how business works, okay? Business and wages and employment are fluid aspects in a business. Sometimes you need more workers, sometimes you don't. But when you got workers, I don't know. When I ran a business, I didn't like being the Lord necessarily. But to me, business is almost like family, and you embrace people, and you just don't kick them to the curb. With that stated, we do need to get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Horror in the Light. In 1993, an episode entitled Home on the X-Files, a show not afraid to venture into horror, was pulled due to its disturbing and visceral nature. Transfer that level of shocking from the dark recesses of a rural pre-20th century American house to bucolic Scandinavia at the summer solstice, and you have an idea of what you're in store for with the film Midsummer. That and the fact that it's from director Ari Aster, who brought us 2018's Hereditary. The story begins with college student Danny Arter deciding, after a family trauma, to accompany her less-than-supportive boyfriend Christian to a once-every-90-year festival in Sweden. He's doing graduate work in anthropology, and with others is invited by a fellow student, Pele, who's from the ancestral commune of a group known as the Harga. Calling them a cult doesn't quite capture it. Dressed in white and with flowered headbands, they indulge in a not always coherent hodgepodge of animistic activity involving dancing, drugs, and fertility rituals, as well as animal and human sacrifice. The festivities form the backdrop for the drama playing out among the visitors, especially the deteriorating relationship between Danny and Christian. Astor's direction is unconventional. A sweeping vertical orbital shot of the visitors driving in telegraphs that you're indeed going somewhere upside down. There's little star power here. You may recognize the Maze Runner's Will Poulter, but it's up-and-coming British actress Florence Pugh who skillfully takes the Danny character from confused victim to a sort of sinister kingpin. It's unlikely you've seen a film like Midsommar before. It gets that with horror in broad daylight, there truly is no place to hide. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Have you ever wanted to speak another language? Whether you want to speak Spanish, French, or German, Babbel's 10 to 15-minute lessons can get you speaking confidently in your new language within weeks. Babbel's spaced repetition method gradually builds your language skills so you intuitively remember what you've learned. No wonder Babbel is the #1 selling language learning app in the world. Try Babbel for free. Go to Babbel.com or download the app. That's Babbel, Babbel.com, or download the Babbel app to try for free.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christine Herman.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
July 20th marks 50 years since human beings first landed on the moon. That momentous date in 1969 made astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin household names. But years before that, a lesser-known figure was on a mission to make that first moon landing possible. His name was John Hobart. The son of Dutch immigrants, Hobart grew up on a farm in Joliet, Illinois. He studied engineering at the University of Illinois and eventually worked his way to NASA. It was there in the early 60s that he put his career on the line to champion what was, at the time, an unpopular idea, but would ultimately be critical to getting Apollo 11 to the moon and safely back.
John faced a mixture of indifference, at times abuse, and at times ridicule that he never forgot, until things started to change and engineers started to realize his data might be right.
Todd Zwillich, author of the new Audible original spoken word book about Hobart's life. It's called The Man Who Knew the Way to the Moon. So what was Hobart's unpopular idea? He championed what's called lunar orbit rendezvous. The concept involves sending a spacecraft into orbit around the moon, and from there sending only a small, lightweight craft down to the moon's surface instead of the entire ship. Zwillich says while Hobart didn't invent the idea, he was the one who started to apply it to the technologies that were within NASA's grasp at the time.
Most of the people who know the most about this mission feel that without lunar orbit rendezvous, Apollo couldn't have succeeded. And without John Hobart, you probably wouldn't have had lunar orbit rendezvous.
Zwillich's book also explores the kinds of challenges NASA engineers face today as they make plans to get back to the moon and ultimately to Mars.
When you talk about Mars, 150 million miles. Orders of magnitude of a bigger problem. Do we do some form of Martian orbit rendezvous? Do we send a station, build a station in Martian orbit that we can stage down to the surface to manage all that mass? A lot of problems to think about.
Those problems, he says, create plenty of debates today. With the story of John Hobart as an example, something considered highly unlikely now might be the key to eventually putting people on the red planet. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christine Herman.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
This Civil Liberties Minute is about prison labor and a high school. I'm Bill Newman. As part of a journalism class, an Amherst, Massachusetts high school senior, Spencer Cleash, wrote a 3,000-word expose on how his school system was using prison labor, inmates at Norfolk State Prison, to reupholster the high school and middle school's auditorium seats. The school system secured that contract for a reason. Massachusetts prison labor is cheap. Prisoners are paid between 14 cents and $1 an hour, according to the Department of Corrections. This extremely well-written story puts competing interests in sharp relief. On one hand, the prisoners are being totally exploited. On the other hand, the work can teach a skill. The story has gone viral. And as a result of the expose, the school system has announced that it will no longer use prison contract labor. There's an even bigger story to this story. And that is that good, accurate, thoughtful, well-written reporting still matters. This work by young people disproves Trump's insidious pronouncements that the press is the enemy of the people. It's not. And the students at the Amherst Regional High School journalism class, as Crosby, Stills, and Nash put it, have taught us well.
Teach your parents well.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1892. That was the day that Lithuanian-born anarchist Alexander Berkman attempted to shoot steel magnate Andrew Carnegie's second-in-command, Henry Clay Frick. Berkman wanted to avenge the Homestead Steel Massacre, in which 9 workers were killed. Berkman's lover, Emma Goldman, wrote in her autobiography, "Frick is the responsible factor in this crime." She went on to write that Berkman had told her, "I will kill Frick, and of course, I shall be condemned to death. I will die proudly in the assurance that I gave my life for the people, but I will die by my own hand. Never will I permit our enemies to kill us." Alexander Berkman went to Frick's office on July 21st, posing as a New York City hiring agency representative. When Berkman was told Frick could not see him, he left. He returned 2 days later. He burst into Frick's office and fired 2 shots at Frick's head. Several of Frick's associates were able to wrestle him to the ground. Still, Berkman managed to take out the sharpened steel file he was carrying and stabbed Frick twice. Despite all of this, Frick did not die. Berkman was in jail for 2 months awaiting trial. Alexander Berkman was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison. He served 14 years of his term before being released. Berkman wrote an account of his prison years titled "Prison Memoirs of an Anarchist." In 1917, he and Emma Goldman were arrested and found guilty of violating the Espionage Act, and both were imprisoned for 2 years. In 1918, both were deported from the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019. I'm Mark Boulanger. In his first address as General Secretary of Education International, David Edwards laid out the challenges his 32 million members face. Corporations wanting to privatize education, the rise of right-wing demagogues, politicians who cage migrant children, underpaid teachers, misogynist inequality. And then he looked out at the teachers and other education workers attending EI's Global Congress in Bangkok and said,
If only there was a profession who could help students and societies make sense of this complexity. If only there were a profession that combined the knowledge we have constructed across disciplines and centuries with the ethical values that inform the use of that knowledge. Oh, if only there were a profession committed to deeply understanding and supporting human development, well-being and learning, one that is deeply curious and had research and collaborative problem-solving hardwired into its DNA. If only there were a profession that could bring together local ways of knowing and cultural practices with global understanding and awareness of universal rights. Open-minded, open source. If only there were a profession rooted in every community in the world. Imagine the power of its practitioners. Imagine if they were also active, trusted, and influential members of those very same communities. Woof. Such a profession might be able to actually bridge the possible with the desirable and lead informed debates using facts and information. Of course, the emergence of such a profession onto the current scene would immediately draw the ire, the anger of those who benefit from inequality, unconscious consumption, insecurity, fear, ignorance, mistrust, and, well, a globally rigged system. Such a profession would need to have its own democratic structures and independence to assert its influence, rights, value as it bravely shines its lights into the encroaching darkness and defends the vulnerable. Such a profession would need to count on solidarity at its core, as it would never be able to purchase the influence and tools that would be marshaled against it. Such a profession would require a union of purpose that defends its autonomy and its rights in law and in practice. If only there was a profession that organized locally, nationally, regionally, and internationally to inspire and empower. Such an organized, respected, and principled profession might be able to chart a different course, construct a different architecture, and maybe even elevate fairness and decency as global priorities. Colleagues, the time for strongmen, technical advisors, neoliberal privatizing entrepreneurs, fearmongers, nativists, market fundamentalists, demagogues, narcissists, and managerialists must be brought to a close because we are the ones that we've been waiting for. We braid the knowledge of our profession with the strength of our trade union movement and the conviction of our social justice ideals. We are much more than knowledge workers. We are organized wisdom workers. We speak all languages. We bear witness to all atrocities and accomplishments, and we defend the truth. Collectively, we seek a better, more just bargain for our societies, our schools, and our students. What happens next, how we build power, navigate complexity, and fend off the democratic assaults can best be posited by beginning with a single but oh so powerful word. We, nous, nosotros, wir. Thank you.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Marc Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it is all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 64 degrees. A bit cooler today, slated for a high in the upper 80s to low 90s, when we were a bit warmer than that yesterday. Partly cloudy conditions currently. Winds are light and variable out of the southeast. Will be shifting out of the west-northwest in a couple of hours and increasing to 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clearing up for most of the day. Tonight will be mostly clear. Lows in the upper 50s to low 60s. And winds will continue at 5 to 10 miles per hour, but out of the north-northwest, continuing out of that direction and velocity tomorrow, where we're slated for a high in the mid-90s. Grass pollen has now gone down to a moderate rating. The air quality index is 14 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is at 8. Locally, barometric pressure is rising at 29.83 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 52%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 92 and sunny. Paris is 98 and sunny with a heat advisory. Rome is 95 and sunny. Kiev is 78 and fair. Kabul is 89 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 85 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 79 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and partly cloudy, and they have a wind advisory on the bay for small craft. And New York is 70 degrees and cloudy with, it looks like, another flash flood watch. So do take care in the Big Apple. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Huawei Technologies, the Chinese company put on a U.S. blacklist because of national security concerns, secretly helped North Korea build and maintain its commercial wireless network. And the Chinese telecommunications giant partnered with a state-owned Chinese firm, Panda International, on a number of projects in North Korea over the last 8 years. Sources briefed on the matter confirmed the Commerce Department has been investigating Huawei since 2016 and is reviewing whether the company violated export control rules in relation to sanctions on North Korea. No wonder Trump got so many love letters. Such a move would raise concerns of whether Huawei, which has used U.S. technology in its components, violated American export controls to furnish North Korea with equipment. Senators Van Hollen and Tom Cotton said in a statement, the revelation underscores the company's ties to North Korea and its serial violations of U.S. law. Wow, Van Hollen and Cotton. They noted that a defense reauthorization bill under consideration in Congress contains new provisions to enforce sanctions on Pyongyang by making it clear that any company that does business with North Korea will face American sanctions.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Piston Mahamba of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Congo's health minister resigned after being stripped of responsibility for managing the country's Ebola outbreak, potentially paving the way for the introduction of a second vaccine to contain the spreading epidemic. Oli Ilunga has overseen the Democratic Republic of Congo's near year-long response to what is the second deadliest Ebola outbreak in history. It has killed more than 1,700 and been declared an international health emergency by the World Health Organization. The president on Saturday, the president of Congo, by the way, Tshisekedi, I'm sorry, butchered your name, I apologize, appointed a team led by Jean-Jacques Muyembe, the head of Congo's Biomedical Research Institute, to coordinate the government's response in Ilunga's place. In his resignation letter, the minister criticized pressure from unnamed actors. Now, there is a belief that the CIA is trying to poison people with the Ebola vaccine. This particular vaccine is manufactured by Johnson & Johnson and backed by WHO, the World Health Organization, as well as the Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders. Across the board, it has been okayed, but there are certain, shall we say, actors who, I don't know, buy into the brainwashing. And this particular health minister did, to the detriment of the people in the Congo. Now, this he said that it has not been proved effective, yet Johnson & Johnson, WHO, and Doctors Without Borders did their blind studies, albeit in a very expedited fashion, because they need more and more effective vaccines to address this contagion, and it must be done. Well, this brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but not for Netroots Radio. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays on Mueller Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme aux langues de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.